Good evening and welcome. It's nice to see everybody packed in. Thank you so much for coming tonight. You're here for Mallory, right? My name is Vanessa, and just some basic housekeeping, which I know you all probably are familiar, but if you need restrooms, they're straight back that way on the left wall. There are hearing-assisted devices in the back. Should you need one, we can help you with that. I'd like to ask that you either turn your phones off or put them on silent so that we can hear. And I'd also like to thank Literati for coming tonight. I'd like to also introduce Barbara McQuade. She's the professor at U of M Law School, a former U.S. attorney from the Eastern District of Michigan, and the author of Attack from Within. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks very much. Well, it's wonderful to see so many people here tonight. I wonder if people are feeling a little bit frustrated, a little bit excited about the possibility of change in the political winds in Michigan.
We need it.
Well, it's my job to introduce our author, and then I'm going to ask her questions for about 30 minutes. Then we're going to open it up to all of you to ask questions for about another 30 minutes. And then Senator McMorrow will be signing books. So that's how we'll allocate our time. The library closes at 8 p.m. sharp, and we're
going to be here for 12 hours.
We will accommodate. So you probably know that Mallory McMorrow is a state senator. She is also a wife and mother of a 4-year-old daughter. She is the very first female Senate Majority Whip in Michigan history. And my favorite fun fact about her, if you read her book, you will learn that she is also a former designer for Hot Wheels. How cool is that? Well, good. So please, how about a round of applause to welcome Senator Mallory McMorrow. Well, I do want to hear more about the Hot Wheels design, because I think that's about the coolest. When you're a kid growing up in Detroit, oh my gosh, for me, designing Hot Wheels, can you imagine a better job? But I do want to ask you one question. I know you're not ready to say anything publicly yet, so I thought you might just share it with our small group of friends here tonight. I'm wondering if you can confirm or deny whether you will be running for the United States Senate.
All right. We're starting off this interview with really easy questions, so softballs.
You know the answer.
So I've not been shy publicly, very seriously exploring a run for the U.S. Senate, and you should expect an announcement in April, and April is very soon.
All right. Well, at some point, I imagine we'll be asked about where Congress has been. I want to kind of, send a note to members of Congress, like, hey, Congress, you up? It seems
truly, I can't imagine. I know we've got an elected official. Any other elected officials in the audience? First of all, Jennifer Conlon, state representative. Aiden Sova, library board, I see up there. I cannot imagine the amount of work that goes into running for office, the amount of hours, the amount of money you have to raise, and then you're going to show up and just not do your job? What is Congress doing?
Yeah, I don't know, but I hope you'll find out soon. Well, let's talk about your book. That's what we're here to talk about tonight. I've had a chance to read it because I got one of these advanced reader copies, and it's fantastic. It's a very readable, enjoyable page-turner. It's half memoir, half how-to manual for all of us to figure out ways to take back our government, and for that, I thank you. But I wanted to ask you, this book actually feels eerily prescient for this moment. And I know that writing a book takes many, many months to write. So you had to have begun this before the last election. What prompted you to write this book? And of course, it's called Hate Won't Win, Find Your Power and Leave This Place Better Than We Found It. What prompted you to write this book?
So many things. So I had a very strange 2022. A colleague of mine in the Senate sent out a fundraising email in which she accused me by name of wanting to groom and sexualize kindergartners and wanting 8-year-olds to believe they were responsible for slavery, as your colleagues do, I suppose. And I gave a speech in response to that, and I'm sure we'll talk about that in a little bit, but that speech went crazy viral and afforded me the opportunity to, I opened a PAC. I used that PAC to help fundraise for other colleagues in the state legislature, but it afforded me the opportunity to travel the country while I was doing that. And over the course of 2022, I talked to thousands of people all over, from red states, from blue states, who were plugged into politics, who were not political, who all said, I'm so overwhelmed. I know I have to do something, but I don't even know where to start. So that is what this book is. I really, when I saw the speech go viral, I worried a little bit that people might see me giving that speech on TV. They might see a quick clip of it and think, well, that's great. That's great that she's doing that, but I could never do that. So the opening part of the book is to kind of rip that off and say, I had no experience that led me to be able to do this that anybody else doesn't have. I woke up shortly after the 2016 election, and there was a video that went viral of middle school students chanting, "Build that wall," at another 5th grader. And that was from Royal Oak Middle School, which was my polling place the day before. So where I was standing in line with my husband, who's here in the back of the room somewhere, to vote for, the end of this national nightmare and hopefully for the first woman president, that's not what happened. And instead we saw kids. And this video clip, it's short. The girl took it on her cell phone, and it's terrifying to watch. You see kids pounding on the lunchroom tables and screaming this at this girl. And that broke me. So I Googled how to run for office and typed into Google how to run for office. I had no idea what I was doing. And the first half of the book details, this is kind of my journey. I started from being mostly apolitical. I voted, I paid attention to what was going on, but I was not a protester. I was not actively involved in campaigns. I had never knocked a single door for a campaign. And I learned, like you learn anything else. And then the second part of the book is to answer that question. I want to do something, but I have no idea where to start. So it is a step-by-step guide for anybody to figure out how to find your motivation, how to tell a compelling story in a way that is going to change somebody's mind, how to talk to elected officials and which elected officials to talk to, that I've seen people be very effective at making change. I've seen people be not as effective. So this is for anybody to find their own voice, to find their own footing. And there's a workbook section in the back. So if you didn't want homework, I'm sorry, but this is a book that requires you to participate. I don't pretend to have all the answers, but you do. And we are going to have to do this together if we're going to get out of this mess.
Yeah, one of the things I really like about this book is not only is it a memoir, but it also is a how-to, because I hear so many people, law students, friends, neighbors, ask me, what can I do to make a difference? And certainly running for office is one of them, but not all of us have the capacity to run for office. But what's great about this book is it tells us lots of things that we can do, from the huge undertaking of running for office to, writing to your member of Congress, to participating in a protest or a group, and how to get plugged into those things. So all of that is great. I want to talk about both parts of this book, though. And so I want to talk about the first part, which is your memoir, that I also find really interesting. And one of the things that is different from a lot of political memoirs, where they talk to you about how brilliant they were and how they figured it all out, and then how smart they were and how clever they were. Most of what you talk about is like your mistakes and your challenges, which I think is very effective because it sounds true and we all have them. But it also makes us realize that you don't have to be a superhero to run for office, right? You're an ordinary person. I mean, obviously a very accomplished person, but you know, you had a child, you've got a husband, you're juggling all of these things. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and growing up that kind of led you to this moment? You said you were not a political person, but I think all of the experiences that we have, you know, make us who we are, including our mistakes and our flaws and our lessons learned.
Yeah, I think that's right. You know, I grew up in a very small town in rural New Jersey. I know that's a scandalous thing to say when you were running for office in Michigan, but was raised in a place that had about 1,000 people in it. And my mom was very, very active in the community. The house that I grew up in was about as old as the country. So it was more than 200 years old. And I didn't realize this was strange at the time, but we didn't have keys to our house. So we never locked the door. And it was very common for me to come home every day and find somebody sitting at the kitchen table, whether it was a neighbor or a family member or an aunt or an uncle or a kid who, you know, one of my brother's friends who had gotten kicked out of their house by their parents who just needed a place to crash. And that was a really beautiful way to grow up because it was community all in one place. And she organized a town-wide annual yard sale, which does not sound like a big deal. But she realized pretty quickly, you know, she saw people in the neighborhood do what we all do, which is we want to get rid of all of our extra stuff and we put it on the lawn. But she had this thought of what if we all did it together? And she started organizing the neighborhood, and it got to a place where I just remember watching from 6 a.m. on the day of the townwide annual yard sale, there were cars with license plates from New York and Connecticut and Rhode Island, and it became a thing that was famous in, you know, the tri-state area. And the local tractor supply company gave my mom a brand new Gator for free to drive for a whole day. And I just thought that was the coolest thing I had ever seen. And I saw this entire community come to life where it wasn't just about we're going to sell our things. It was a place for everybody to come together, and it got so successful that then she turned it into a fundraiser for the volunteer fire department. And growing up in that, you know, I interviewed her for this book, and I asked her what it was like to be an organizer. And I think she heard it in the political sense, and she was like so offended. She was like, this wasn't political. We didn't talk about politics. But that's what politics is. It's building connection. It's getting to know your neighbors and building power to make the change you want to see in your community. So having grown up in that, I think in a way, this was a path I was supposed to go down, but that's very different than I think what most people think of, which is it's Democrats versus Republicans and it's red versus blue and we have to attack each other. It's actually just getting to know each other and deciding what kind of community do we want to live in and then making that change possible.
Yeah, that's so refreshing, I think, in this time, isn't it? I'm looking out at the crowd and I see people of my vintage. My people are here. And we remember a time when politics was not red versus blue, right? It was about solving problems and governing and advancing our country, advancing human progress, advancing education and other kinds of things. So that's very refreshing. And so interesting that you saw this example of your mom and that you have picked up and follow it. But I want to hear a little more about the Hot Wheels. Tell me about designing Hot Wheels. You told me before we came down about a product that you designed that blew me away. That sounded so interesting.
Oh yeah. So I'm going to tell you how this does connect to my job, I swear. So I graduated with a degree in industrial design from the University of Notre Dame. I'm sorry. Go Irish.
Heard of it.
And I graduated wanting to be a car designer in 2008. I don't know if you remember what was happening in 2008.
We know.
So I had a great internship. I designed a concept car when I was a senior in college that was built live on stage at the LA Auto Show. And you would think that would set me up for success. And then there was a day where the Chrysler Pacifica concept studio out in Southern California just closed. The doors were locked. And I showed up to work. I was at Mazda when it was under Ford at PAG, and realized, oh, I'm not getting a job. That's not going to happen. So I stayed out there. I lived in the back of my car very briefly. I did not have any health insurance. I applied to 300 jobs, eventually found my way into Mattel. And we joked at the time that in the depths of the recession, people could still afford cars when they only cost $1. So we were doing okay. But I worked my way up to becoming a senior designer over global branding and licensing, and my name is on a patent. I was part of a team that invented a ride-on toy. It was about yay big, that you rode face first, like an Olympic skeleton.
What could possibly go wrong?
And it had a powered wheel in the back. It was a 3-wheeler, and it had spark plates on it, and you could kick it out, and it would spark flames. Not dangerous at all. We built an adult-sized prototype that went 45 miles an hour that I would ride around the campus of Mattel. But, years later when I'm running for office, it is very popular to run for office in Metro Detroit and have your name on a Hot Wheels car, which I do. There's a Hot Wheels car that says Mallory on it. But also the idea of problem solving. When you're a designer, you identify a problem or a need. You come up with 1,000 different designs or ideas or concepts, and then you test them. And then if they don't work, you change and you pivot and you hold focus groups and you get feedback, and then you work towards the best design solution. And I think we need a lot more of that in our politics, instead of people just fighting tooth and nail, thinking that their idea is the best idea there's ever been and there's no other idea.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful approach. Well, despite your origins in New Jersey and that school in Indiana, I forget what it's called, you had a lot of Erie, Detroit connections. So there's the Hot Wheels thing with the auto industry. You are married to Ray Wirtz, and anybody old enough to remember the 1968 Tigers know he is related to Don Wirtz,
Yes,
Detroit
he is.
Tigers 1968 fame, and you have a dog named Detroit.
We do.
Was it karma that brought you here to Michigan, or car that brought you here to Michigan?
It was a little of the above. So our dog, she's 14. She is a pit bull boxer mix. We got her when she was 2. And she has a brindle coat with a white belly and white paws. So we looked at her and we're like, oh, that looks like the tiger statue outside of Comerica Park. But Tiger was a little too on the nose. So she's Detroit the dog. My husband is a native Michigander. He is a 4th-generation Royal Oaker. And yes, the nephew of Don Wirtz. And friends of ours organized a road rally around the state of Michigan when I was living and working in other parts of the country. So we would fly into Detroit, 30 creative professionals from all over the country, get a bunch of cars, drive all around the state of Michigan, up into the UP, over into the Thumb, to the west side of the state. You didn't know where you were going. It was a mystery route every year. And I absolutely fell in love with Michigan, with this state. It's amazing. I don't have any data to back it up, but I am convinced there are more Michigan-themed window stickers and bumper stickers on Michigan license-plated cars than any other state in the country. Michiganders love Michigan and love working together, and that is just infectious. And Michigan made me the best version of myself, and it's the best move I ever made.
That's awesome. Michigan does have the best what do you call it? Iconography, whatever it is, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So it makes for good stickers.
Yeah,
on
don't
cars.
just stick one hand up in the legislature. Ed McBroom, the senator from the Upper Peninsula, will be like, no, there's an entire other hand.
Got to get them all if you're going to represent the entire state. Just saying. You talk a lot about moms in your book, your own mom, and you are a mom. You have a daughter who is 4 years old. I get this question a lot, like, what's it like to balance work and family? But it is an enormous sacrifice, and frankly, one I am not willing to make, to put yourself out there, not only from the time away from home, but there are lots of busy jobs that take you away from home, but to put you and your family out there where you are the target. You mentioned this viral video that people were talking about you as a pedophile and a groomer and all these false things. People will say awful things about you, will threaten you, will come to your home. What makes you still want to do it despite all of those obstacles?
So first of all, I have a great support network. I have an incredible husband. I have an incredible family who are so supportive of what I do and what we do, and it's impossible without that. But more than that, I think now that I am a mom, and when I ran for office for the first time, we had just gotten married. We got married at Eastern Market, and then a month later, I filed to run for state senate. So it was like, let's go.
Was that in the prenup, Ray?
This will be fun. But the first few years, I didn't have a daughter, and I wasn't pregnant. I remember a woman in Troy in my first campaign who was grilling me about it at the door. She said, "Do you have any kids? And are you going to have any kids? And how many kids are you going to have? And when are you going to have them?" And she wasn't asking about my background or my policy priorities. And she finally said to me, "I would vote for you, but this is not a job for a mom. That I need to know that my senator is going to be doing this job full time." And my predecessor, who I was running against, owned a restaurant and an insurance agency and had developed a reputation for not holding town halls. And that didn't matter. And I remembered that after I became a mom. And I just think about Noah and the world that I want her to grow up in, where she learns the full breadth of history, where she meets people who are different than she is and feels like she can go into that with a sense of curiosity and ask them questions, and that's not a bad thing, and that no matter who she is and who she becomes, she is welcomed and accepted because of that. And we have to fight for that future. I mean, I just look at some of the people who get into this work to be, for lack of a better phrase, viral trolls, who are just bring the worst of what this country is forward, who make their career about demonizing and attacking other people. And yeah, it's hard. Sometimes you need the support, but I firmly believe my daughter and our kids will grow up in a better place if there are people who actually care about making that future for them.
Very good. Well, I have two more questions for you, and then we are going to take questions from the audience. So one is, you really became onto the national map when you gave that viral speech on the floor of the Senate. You also then gave a speech at the DNC, and one thing I will compliment you on, you got a great voice. Doesn't she have a great voice? Like you could be, do radio or advertising voiceovers or something. It's a great voice. Is that your goal, to have a voice, or is there something more about what you want to do? Because those viral moments have been powerful. The one when you spoke out about that attack on you and how important it was to speak as an ally for people that maybe you have the privilege as a white, cisgender woman that other people don't have. Is speaking out the goal, or is there something more?
There's definitely something more. It's strange. I've had people reach out to me and they're like, "What is it like to go viral?" I mean, it's weird. It's not ever what I thought would happen in my life, as if that's the goal. That, I've got to give this speech, or I have to do a dance, or, something that's going to get attention and go viral. Alone, that doesn't do anything. You're just adding to noise. So what we did, I gave that speech, I put it up on my Twitter account, and I had a tweet thread with the speech in writing, and within 24 hours, it had been viewed more than 10 million times. Crazy. I was on MSNBC and CNN, and Fox News called me liberal Karen with a headband. So, we made it. And it just kept going. So 2 weeks went by, and I figured this is, 15 minutes of fame I did not ask for and certainly didn't want. But people kept calling with interview requests, and that was the moment that we recognized we can do something with this. So we built up a small team and had a crazy idea. What if we use this to raise $1 million to try to flip the state Senate for the first time since 1984? Bonkers. So we opened a PAC. We built out a media strategy for the rest of the year, trying to get Michigan into the national spotlight, to be able to talk about everything that was happening on the ground here, the opportunity that we had in front of us, and make the case that people should be focused on state legislatures, not what's happening in Washington, but what happens in the state. It was a lofty idea. Not even opponent, my colleague who accused me of these horrible things, the beautiful thing about campaign finance is that it's all public. So we found out how much she raised off of that email. Does anybody want to venture a guess? This is always fun. Shout out a number. How much did she raise? $150,000. 200. So close. She raised $235.
The winner up front.
By the end of my year, we had raised more than $2.5 million. And it wasn't just to win. It's because, something I'm so proud of in Michigan is that we took this power that we hadn't had in my entire lifetime, and we repealed the retirement tax on seniors. We expanded the earned income tax credit to lift tens of thousands of families out of poverty, kids out of poverty. We expanded early childhood education and preschool and childcare. We expanded the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act to explicitly protect LGBTQ people at a moment when other states are trying to legislate them out of existence. We passed gun violence prevention bills. My first bill ever signed into law created Michigan's red flag law. I worked on it for 5 years. So, I think there is power in using your voice and capturing attention, but it's what you do with it that matters, not just about going viral and getting famous, because my God, there's too much of that right now. And we have to stop focusing on electing reality TV stars.
You're here. All right, so last question. We said this book is half memoir, half how-to manual. And as Senator McMorrow has said, it also contains a workbook to help the reader figure out where you can plug in and what you can do to help make a difference. I wonder if you couldn't just tell us, though, maybe one thing each of us can do to make a difference in our politics and in our communities.
Absolutely. All right, so first of all, show of hands. Who feels overwhelmed right now? That's what I thought. You just have to know that that is part of the strategy. If it feels like there is an endless fire hose of bad headlines and horrible news and things coming at us constantly, you've written a book about this as well, about disinformation and the attack from within, which is available in the back. I'm just going to put that out there.
Thank you.
It is designed to make us feel overwhelmed and powerless and to shut down. It is designed to shut us down. So it may feel uncomfortable, but what I tell people all the time is you have to find the one thing that motivates you. Find your one issue. And I've shared this example on my Instagram. If you follow me, I answer questions every week. We have one constituent in my district named Jane O'Shea. She's a member of the Junior League of Birmingham. She's also a domestic violence survivor. This is her one issue, is using her pain and her lived experience to make sure people don't have to go through what she went through. So we now have a address confidentiality law for survivors of domestic violence because of Jane, because she worked for years to advocate for this bill to become a law. And now on any issue related to domestic violence, she contacts us. And because I have a relationship with just a regular person who reached out, I contact her to ask for her advice as bills come before me about domestic violence as they impact victims. Every single one of us has that issue. So I would advocate everybody to go home tonight and just really take time, journal, think about it, go for a walk. What is your one thing that is going to encourage you to get up every day and plug in and pay attention, because that is what is going to sustain you for the long term, so that you're actively participating. I like to say that, voting is very important, of course, but it's the bare minimum. All of us have that one friend who texts us once every 2 years. That's voting. So cool. But we need to have a real relationship with our communities and our state and our country. And we only do that. So pick your one thing. It can feel very uncomfortable to let go of all of the other issues. But I believe that if we all do that, we find our thing and we trust that everybody else is going to find their thing and engage in that same way, that we're all going to be okay.
All right, very good. All right, and now it is your turn. We've got a microphone here up front. So if you have a question, don't be shy. Use your voice. Dazzle Mallory with your voice, just as she has dazzled us with hers.
You don't even need to be slandered first. You can just get up and ask a question.
So let us know your question.
Thank you. This question is for both of you. You'll understand why. Right now, there's 7 or 8 bills that were passed by the Michigan legislature that have not been sent to the governor for a signature. A judge said, you have to send the bills, and I think it's the House Speaker is sitting on them. Both legally and as a legislator, how would you respond to this?
I'll defer to you.
Certainly. So in the Senate, to give everybody the context on this question, power changed. The power in the state house changed during the last election. Democrats controlled it, now Republicans control it. Between last term and this term, there were 9 bills that were not presented to the governor for her signature. The Constitution in the state of Michigan is very clear on this. The Constitution says the legislature shall present bills passed by the legislature to the governor. It's not an if. It does not give you any authority to decide whether or not bills should be presented. So I'm in the Senate, and in the Senate, we sued the House. We sued the Speaker of the House, and a judge did rule in our favor, saying that the bills should be presented. The Speaker still has refused to do so, so this will very likely play out in courts. But from the Senate's perspective, we believe very strongly in upholding the Constitution, and we are going to do everything we can to keep this going in court to compel those bills to be sent to the governor.
Effective government, right here. Yes.
Hi, my name is Jennifer. I have 3 kids in public school, and my one issue is the unique and restrictive way that Michigan funds public schools. I am wondering how you, as Democratic leadership in the Senate, are going to handle the budget that cuts the school bus, that cuts the money for the public schools by 25%, that the Republicans in the House passed in a surprise.
So what's happening right now in Michigan is the worst of Donald Trump-style politics has made its way into the state house. If we lose the federal Department of Education, which I think a lot of people misunderstand, that the federal Department of Education has nothing to do with curriculum, it has to do with funding. It has to do with funding, it has to do with civil rights, it has to do with disability protections. The state of Michigan will already stand to lose $2 billion in education funding if Trump and McMahon are successful in eliminating the Department of Education. On top of that, the state house passed a budget on a party line vote that would cut an additional $5 billion from the state education fund. That is 25% of our state education budget. Now, what we could do, if that is the reality that we are given, first of all, I can tell you right now it is not, because that is dead on arrival in the Senate. It's not going to happen. We will not allow that to happen.
Thank you.
But let's say it were to happen. I just want to paint a picture for everybody. Michigan is not allowed constitutionally to run a deficit. We must pass balanced budgets every year. we now have a rainy day fund. This is the money that we set aside for emergencies, for downturns, for recessions. We now have a $2.7 billion balance in our rainy day fund. It's the highest that fund has ever been because we were very fiscally responsible over the last few years with COVID relief dollars, with some extra revenues that we brought in. If we were to lose $2 billion in education, that would blow through that rainy day fund that we would use to backfill for just 1 year. Think about that. So what you can do about it, because we're going to need your help in this cause. Right now, I'm telling you, that budget dead on arrival in the Senate, we will not allow that to happen. But what you can do, now that you know this, is everybody in this room contact your elected official. And if you're here, you likely have an elected official that supports education funding. But you all have one friend or family member who lives somewhere else in Michigan, who may be represented by somebody on the other side of the aisle. And if you can just go home and explain this to them and say, please contact your legislator and say, this is unacceptable. Because they do respond to pressure. At the end of the day, they have to think about their own reelection. And that's what we can do to fight back and make sure that our education is funded.
Great question, great answer. While we're waiting for our next question, I want to ask you this question. What is the best way to reach out to our state representatives, state senators, and U.S. members of Congress? I've heard email is the best way. I've heard calling is the best way. I've heard writing postcards is the best way. What do you think is the most effective way to reach them in a way that might be influential?
So the simplest way to think about it is you are going to get out what you put in. So if you think about it through that lens, number one, I advise people never to fill out online petitions. Change.org, Action Network, it's really easy. It's like click a button and it sends an email automatically. I can tell you in our office, we have a meeting every Monday. We review all of the constituent communications that come in. We will tally those and we'll say, oh, there's 57 in support of this, there's 60 opposed to that. But that doesn't actually tell us anything about you. It's a carbon copy email that an organization has put together. So we'll count it. But organizations also use those to collect your information so that they can fundraise off of you. So just know that. It's probably the least effective thing you can do for actually making change, but you're likely going to get texted and called all the time to be asked for money. Instead, I would advise contacting less frequently. But if you can take the time, if it's an issue that really matters to you, whether it's in an email, whether it's a phone call, whatever is your comfort level, to tell a personal story. Take a few minutes. Why do you care about this? Who are you? Why does it affect you? Stories are so much more powerful than research and data, and there's a ton of science to back this up. And I'll give you just one example. I introduced a bill in a package of bills called the Justice for Survivors Act that was to extend the statute of limitations for survivors of childhood sexual abuse. We were thinking about abuse in the church and in Boy Scouts as we were drafting this legislation. And I got an email from one of my constituents in Detroit, a man who said that this is something he had gone through and shared about the years of therapy and work that he went through just to be able to talk about it and how much this legislation would change his life. And we talked about that story in that email as an entire team. And I'm sharing it with you now. So that's the impact that you can have. But that's why just take your time. You'll get out what you put in. So if you shoot off a quick phone call, reading a script, or send out an Action Network email, it'll count. But take your time and put some thought into it.
Thanks. That's great advice. Yes.
Hi, my name's Alec. It's a pleasure to meet you. My question is around the proposed funding for the Copperwood mine in the Porcupine Mountains. I know in December it looks like it was halted by the Senate for now, but is there a unified kind of democratic strategy to stop that funding or the mine altogether to protect our state parks?
So thank you for the question. And yes, in the Senate, we did not have, I was opposed to that funding, as were a number of my Democratic colleagues, so that grant was not pushed through. For those who are following, this is Copperwood Mine. This is a mine in the Porcupine Mountains that has requested $50 million in public funds to support a mining project. There is nothing in state law that would stop them from doing this on their own as a company. I think it's important to realize that. The only real power that we have as a legislature is to deny their request for public funds. And from our stance, and I know I share this belief with a number of my colleagues, is that if you are mining our natural resources, we shouldn't pay you to do that. So that's where we are. So, the dynamics haven't changed in the Senate. The members haven't changed. So if they were to put that vote up again, I feel very strongly that it wouldn't pass again. But this is where advocating with local bodies of government, with the commissioners, like in the area, because they are the ones that will approve the project, approve the permits. And this is why I always advise going local. So I don't think there's any progress on the state level, but keep working it locally, because that's who's going to decide whether or not this project moves forward if the company decides to move forward with their own funding.
Thank you.
Hello, my name's Wyatt, and being a student that can't really vote at the time being, what assurances can you offer that corporate greed won't continue to leach into the American political system?
Wyatt, how old are you?
I'm 18, actually.
So you can vote.
Oh, yeah, wait. Oh, my God.
Are you registered to vote?
I am registered to vote.
Fantastic. Congratulations. This is an exciting year for you.
Thank you.
So when I first ran for office, and I think you will find very little opposition to the idea that we need robust campaign finance reform, that there is too much money in our politics flat out. Yes, we should all applaud that. It is also very expensive to run a campaign. You're effectively starting a small business from nothing. You have to pay your staff. You have to pay for volunteers. You have to pay for your website. You have to pay for access to NGP Van. I raised in my first campaign close to $400,000, calling every poor person who had ever given me a business card or who I had met at a party. There's an anecdote in my book about calling a guy in Chicago who I hadn't seen since we were at a kegger at a party in college, and he didn't remember meeting me, and I felt so vulnerable that I wanted to crawl under the table and die, because there is nothing worse than just asking people for money when they don't remember you. So we have to do the work, and I think that one of the things that is true is the more resources you have, financial resources, that you can use to get the message out, the better. We do need campaign finance reform to make sure that that money is fair, completely transparent, to get rid of dark money in politics. But I really want people to recognize there are really good people who are running on really good things that need the money to win. So that's my advice. I don't have any promises. I wish that we had robust campaign finance, but I've been very transparent about everything I've ever raised and spent, down to the last penny. Every dollar that I raised into my PAC all went to candidates who are running for state house and state senate. And it's going to take people like you for speaking out and for voting this year. For every candidate at every level, pay attention to who's running at local offices too.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, nice to meet you. My name is Paloma, and I'm currently a freshman at the University of Michigan. Awesome. Given recent federal actions against higher education, including the dismantling of the Department of Education, university funding cuts, corporate hiring blacklists of student protesters, and the rise of AI, what advice would you give me as I prepare to become an active citizen who wants to make a difference?
This is the best question I've ever heard. Oh my gosh, you are so prepared.
Thank you.
You were already so far ahead of where I was, even when I started getting involved. So I share a story in the book about, I Googled how to run for office, and I wanted to go to the Women's March, and I had never been to a protest. I was terrified. So I called friends of mine who were much more active protesters, and I wanted advice from them. And they said, okay, here's what you got to do. You got to write your emergency contact phone number on your arm, because when you get arrested, they need to know who to call. When you get maced, use milk, not water. It's going to stink. I was so scared. But I pushed through, and I went to, not even DC, I went to the Women's March in Detroit, truly shaking in my boots and had no idea what to expect. And what I found was just an incredible amount of like-minded women and girls, multiple generations of families who just all came together with this idea of, we just need to find each other. And that was so powerful to find other people who felt the way that I did. And by the end of the afternoon, we had all exchanged phone numbers and emails, and we started trying to figure out how we navigate the system. So I started hosting postcard writing parties at my house. And when I say parties, like one person showed up. We wrote really angry postcards to Betsy DeVos to tell her we did not appreciate the job that she was doing. But then you keep going. And in this moment, I will say, be careful, use your best judgment. I can't say that I've seen, kind of a dip in protests, and I've heard from some groups who rightfully are worried that they may not be safe attending protests, that their identities might be exposed. We don't know what this administration is going to do. So use your best judgment, participate, but find a support network of people who value you and understand you and who will protect you and who will be on this journey together with you in a way that we need. You asking this question, we need you in this process, no matter what happens. So thank you.
Thank you
for
so
doing
much.
it.
I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
So this is actually a good segue into my question, seeing the younger generation up here. Excuse me, Michigan native, graduated from U of M in '99, worked on Capitol Hill for many years. And I now kind of have a full circle moment where I work with the Ford School and today's public policy students. And as much as I appreciate we're a multi-generational crowd here tonight, I'm not gonna lie, when I first saw your speech, I remember thinking, finally, this is, sorry, I'm getting a little emotional. Because I'm so proud of you. It means a lot to me to see. Sorry. And I think, what we have seen, and certainly what I see with my students, is there is a big gap with encouraging the younger generation, and for even some of the reasons that you listed. I mean, there are safety issues in being active. I was at the Women's March in DC, and same thing, had all the preparation from folks that kind of protest for a living, and it was very safe. We don't know. We're in a world that's very uncertain. I would love your take on how we encourage younger folks to get involved when there are all these risks. Also, if I had $1 for every person I know who knows what Doja Cat wore to the Grammys but can't tell me they're a member of Congress, that's my judgment. That's my cranky 40-something-year-old thing. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Thank you. So the core of my answer is we have to treat young people with respect, truly, and recognize that everybody's starting from where they're starting from.
Yeah.
And I think giving young people steps in the same way that we all took steps, that I started with the one postcard that I wrote to Betsy DeVos with one person. Did that change the world? No. But that was my first step. And then I took another one, and then I took another one, and then I found Emerge Michigan, which is part of Emerge America, which is an organization that recruits and trains Democratic women to run for office. And, I kept growing from there. I feel like sometimes people are too hard on young people for not being where they are and not recognizing, I'm now almost 40. I've had a lot of growth in the amount of time that I've participated, whereas somebody who's 16, 17, 18, 20, 21, 22 hasn't yet. They haven't lived my life. I would not be in office if it weren't for high schoolers who couldn't vote yet. I got an email from a group of students at Royal Oak High School in the wake of the Parkland shooting who demanded a meeting with me. I was a candidate. I wasn't in office yet. They said, will you meet with us at Starbucks on Sunday? We want to know what you're going to do about gun violence. that is not what I was doing when I was 15. No. And I took that meeting, and, you know, part of why I did was the older brother of one of my best friends in high school was shot and killed in the Virginia Tech shooting. And to see these kids who didn't take inaction as an answer was motivating for me and pushed me to realize we can actually do something about this. Because when it happened when I was in college and I was watching Virginia Tech play out, I felt so powerless to do anything. And I shared the story. We did an event last night, and it's in the book too. One of the students who volunteered with me in my first campaign, her name was Grace. She was a student at Rochester Adams High School, and gun violence was a really important issue to her. So she couldn't vote yet, but she knew she wanted to do something. So as a high schooler, she signed up to canvass with me. Again, not what I was doing in high school. And she was so nervous. And when you came out to canvass with us, we would pair people up, experienced people with people who were new, and she got paired up with me. And I could tell how nervous she was. And what she didn't know was how nervous I was, because I was a first-time candidate who had no idea what I was doing, and I was figuring it out every day. And we were knocking doors in a neighborhood that wasn't particularly friendly to Democrats. And we got to a door, and a woman came out who told me right away, an older woman, that Democrats were elitist and looked down on people, that her son was a Border Patrol agent on the southern border, that they had a bunch of guns in their truck, and she didn't want people taking it away from them. And I was like, I don't think this is working. And Grace sort of looked at me with the same look. But then this woman asked Grace, why she was here. And Grace said, well, I care a lot about my school and my classmates and my teachers. And I'm worried about gun violence. That was her issue. And this woman then said that her daughter-in-law was a teacher, and that her job is so hard, and that she has too many kids in her classroom, and she doesn't have the resources, and she has to buy school supplies with her own money. And that was the turning point. And it was because of Grace, who was there. And by the end of the conversation, this was 45 minutes, by the way. So, if you've ever worked on a campaign, this is not how you're supposed to do it. That was way too much time to spend on a door. But by the end of the conversation, this woman looked at the two of us, and she had brought her husband out at this point, and she said, thank you for coming here and listening to us. Because if you had just come here and started rattling off who you were and that you were a Democrat and these are your issues, we would have taken your stuff and just thrown it in the garbage. But you can count on 2 votes from our house and we will take a yard sign. And that is because of a young person who participated. And I share this story a lot, particularly to young people, because we lost Grace to suicide a few years ago. And her mom actually came to my event last night. I didn't know she was in the crowd, and came up to me at the end. And I think about Grace every single day. So, I think we just owe young people a lot more respect. They're starting where they're starting, and any step is a positive step, and we have to reinforce that instead of lecturing them. Because when I was 21 and 22, I was probably paying attention to Fall Out Boy and not Doja Cat, because that wasn't a thing yet. But I couldn't have told you who my state legislators were, and that's okay.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you.
That last question and answer was a natural lead into my question. You said you spoke to thousands of people, red areas, blue areas. You're here tonight, a blue area, very supportive, very democratic. What would you do with a crowd like this that's deeply red, thinks you're elitist, thinks you look down on them, and you want to open a conversation? You don't have the young person. What do you say to them to get this conversation going, to not be a lecture and not be confrontational?
So for me, like anything, I have a unique background. I represent an area in Southeast Michigan that I think a lot of people think is particularly elitist, and particularly Birmingham. I'm not knocking Birmingham, but you meet a lot of people from outstate and they're like, ooh, Birmingham. But I also grew up in a place where, it was very mixed income. And I've been working since I was 12. I worked at a grocery store from a cashier, and they promoted me to be a manager when I was 16. And then I was selling lotto and cigarettes, which was illegal, and they didn't tell anybody. And the grocery store that I worked at, if you hit a deer with your car, we would butcher it for you. And give it back to you. I was a bartender. We all love the Lions. So I think going into any conversation, strip away your partisan identity and the hot button issues of the moment and just recognize we're all Michiganders. We all love this state, most of us. We love our families, we love our communities, and just going in with curiosity, truly try to build a relationship first. Get to know people. Ask questions. Something I love doing when I'm campaigning, which I really love, I'm just a weirdo who loves that this is adult trick-or-treating and I get to go to people's houses in a way that's somewhat acceptable. I usually find something on their porch or in their yard to compliment. I'm a terrible gardener. Anytime somebody's got a good garden, I compliment it. And right away, that just breaks down a wall because they see you as a person who isn't coming in with an agenda right away. You're not trying to prove that you're right. You're trying to make a connection. And I think we can do that in any room.
Excellent.
And then we can all get a beer.
All right, we'll make this the last question of the night, and then Senator McMorrow will sign your books.
My name is Zoe. As a young person who is trying to be more active in helping people and doing more of that, what would you say is the moment that made you decide you wanted to be an activist and help people?
So I think I was always gravitated towards helping people, and that took a different path throughout my life. One of the reasons that I went to that school in Indiana that shall not be named is that I really loved the embodiment of service. There's aspects of my Catholic upbringing that I still really value. Not all of it, but some of it. And that was one of the pieces that I really held on to. So in my industrial design program, all of our projects were service-oriented. So we designed, portable refugee shelters for war-torn countries that could be flat-packed on, a ship and sent to areas where it could be easily popped up and it didn't require any special tools. I loved that kind of work. And I think what I realized when I got into my career, I loved my job. Being a Hot Wheels designer is very cool. But I missed that aspect of helping people. We had days at Mattel around Christmas. It was the most magical time. You're in Southern California, and we would bring in massive snow machines and bus in kids from downtown LA who had never seen snow. And we would have snowball fights, and they would get Barbies and Hot Wheels. And I loved that day more than every other day. So I think that's why I ended up pivoting and running for office, because that filled a need for me that I was missing. So what I would say to you is there is no perfect path. When I go back to my alma mater and I speak to students, I think they look at my resume and they're very confused. It doesn't make sense on paper. But just trust your gut. Try stuff. Have an honest conversation with yourself. Does this fulfill my need to help people, my desire to help people? And if not, try something else.
Thank you.
So we're going to sign books in a minute, but first, can you please join me in thanking the person I hope will be our next senator in the United States Senate, Mallory McMorrow.
Thank you. And can we please thank Ann Arbor Public Library and Literati Bookstore for putting this on, and Barb for being an incredible moderator. And a big round of applause for all of you for coming out and spending an afternoon with me, or an evening. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Big round of applause for you.
If you would like to get your book signed, we have a signing table over here. The line will queue up along the wall with the windows.